Down to the church building about 6 to open up, and I had just about every door that you can imagine open, so it would hopefully blow a breeze through here. The temperature gauge registered 84, and when I came by the Kiwanis sign it said 73, so I thought, well, we can lower the temperatures somewhat naturally, so we opened the back doors there. This door here going out, my office doors, all the way to the back, classroom doors, everything was opened up. And that takes a little while to get all those doors. Yeah, I'm sorry, Children's Church. Takes a while to get all of those doors opened up. And I came back to the office and sat down and started to do some work. And I heard a thump and a flutter. And as I looked up, I caught this little bird in my office out of the corner of my eye, very close to the door here and by the bookcase. I thought, oh great, I've got a little baby bird in my office. So I quickly closed the door that goes to the copy room and the door that comes to the sanctuary, hoping to leave him only one avenue of escape. And I looked around to see if he was still in the room, and sure enough, he was over by the bookcase facing south. And I suppose the theory was, if I can't see you, then you can't see me. And I thought, well, I'm really not good at bird handling, so let's see if he goes for the open door. And I went back to work. A few minutes later, I got up and I looked back over to where he was, and he was no more there. So I said, mission successful. And I again opened up this door and my other office door and went back to work. A few minutes later, thump. And it sounded like something hit the protective area over the fluorescent lights in there, but I didn't see anything. So I closed this door, I closed the other door, and I look around in my office. I don't see that little bird. I guess he must have exited out. I go back to work. I'm typing up the announcements for the morning service. And quite some time has gone by, and I decided it's time to close up. And I come through this door, and I see back here in the Cercado section, as I walk down the aisle, a little baby bird. As best I can make out, it was a little robin. And so I walk over toward it, and it kind of goes to the door, which is open, but it doesn't go out the door. It starts to come up this wall here, and it gets as far as that final vent over there. So I circle back around, and I go over there, and I go down that wall right toward the little bird. He's on the edge of the vent, and now I'm standing on the other edge of the vent, and he's not moving. So I move a little bit closer toward him, and finally he goes out and flies up to that overhang out there where people like to take their wedding pictures. And then I quickly close every door. The little bird, if I may call him Bird Brain, as cute as he was, had his freedom once, and he came back and did the same foolish thing again. That kind of leads in, I didn't plan on it this way, but when the Lord drops something in your lap, you use it as the introduction to a lesson on bird brains or fools. Okay? And Proverbs has a lot to say about the fool. Probably around 70 times the fool in all of his glory is mentioned. There are 5 different words that the wise man used to describe a fool. And we're not going to go into all the distinctions of those, but just know that there are different degrees of being foolish. You may be the complete fool, and all of those words apply to you. Or you may just be the simple fool. We want to take a look at what we have here this morning in order to foolproof ourselves if we can. When Saul was on the chase for David, and he was trying to kill what he thought was his opposition, David was not going to lay a hand on Saul to take over the throne. But Saul and his jealousy, this man who started off humble, they had to find him to make him king in the first place. But over time, he sort of lost it and did some foolish things. And finally, in 1 Samuel, Saul is on the hunt for David. And David and his men are in the wilderness on the run. But they spot Saul and his crew, led by Abner. They're looking for David. And David and his mighty men go into the very camp where all of Saul's men and Saul himself are asleep. And we're told later in the text that the Lord gave them this sleep. And when the Lord puts you to sleep, you don't wake up until he wants you to wake up. Just ask Adam. Okay? David and Abishai go down to where Saul is, and his spear is stuck in the ground at his head, and there's a water jug there. And Abishai says, "Do you want me to do him in, my lord? I can do it with one swipe of the spear, and he'll never know what hit him." David says, "No, I will not raise my hand against the Lord's anointed. If he is taken out, the Lord is going to have to do it. I will not do that." But they do take the spear. They do take the water jug. They get safely off on a hill, and then they call out to these sleepers. And David sort of taunts Abner and says, "You have really been unfaithful to your master, the king, because you let his life be in jeopardy. Here's his spear, here's his water jug that were by his head, and we refuse to lay our hands to the Lord's anointed." And Saul, recognizing that his life had been spared and that he was doing foolish stuff, has what I think is one of the saddest lines in all of Scripture. He said, "I have played the fool. I've done foolish things. I've lived foolishly here in pursuing something that was not real, was not a real threat." I didn't cure him of his foolery. He picks it up later on. But as we go through some of these scriptures about being a fool, let's recognize that we at times may be foolish ourselves, and we may be different kinds of fools and act in different foolish ways. Or we may know somebody who is a fool, and I would ask you not to look around. And we want to learn, how should we deal with fools, if that be the case. The fool is, number one, portrayed in Proverbs as anyone between unsophisticated or simple, the simple fool, and the unseemly, the scoffer fool. Those are sort of the parameters. You have a simple fool who just is kind of naive, but you also have a scoffer who's that hardened fool, and he mocks and he scoffs at the things of God and is not willing to move from his foolishness. This is one of the reasons Solomon tells us he wrote the Proverbs. It is for giving prudence to those who are simple. That fool that is sort of the naive fool. Knowledge and discretion to the young. Scholars think that he may have had in mind his son Rehoboam, who is to become the next king of Israel to succeed him. And if you will remember his son Rehoboam, after listening to fatherly advice, you read the first 9 chapters of Proverbs, and you have several fatherly advice sections. Listen, my son, my son, my son. That may be literally for his son Rehoboam, who didn't take in all the message because he acted foolishly later, and he listened to some bad advisors, his contemporaries, his young advisors, instead of listening to the older, wiser ones, and he split the kingdom. He acted foolishly. And so Solomon says, I want to write for the simple fool, the naive fool, so that in hopes he will learn. The prudent, the wise, see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. This naive individual doesn't think ahead, doesn't see the problem that is developing, doesn't see the problem that they're getting themselves into until, oh, how did I get in this mess? But the wise pay attention. The simple will pay the price, he says. How long, O naive ones, simple ones, will you love being simple-minded? And scoffers, you're on the hardened end of the spectrum here. How long will you delight yourself in scoffing? And fools hate knowledge. So what does Solomon have to say about this fool as he paints a portrait of what a fool looks like? It's what we would call an unattractive portrait. And you'll notice on your outline that the first 5 points here start with un, or un, and we'll see some of the unness of the fool, okay? The fool, whichever kind he is unrealistic. The way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. Okay? Now, if you have the assumption that I'm always right, I thought I was wrong one time. That's the only time I've been wrong, was when I thought I was wrong. That's the fool's default position. He always thinks he's right. And the time I thought I was wrong, I was mistaken. I was right then too. Okay? The fool always thinks he's right. The wise are willing to listen to advice. How good are you at listening? We're going to put up a quote this week by Rick Warren. It says that kindness is the first step in, or listening is the first step of kindness. When we are listening, we're showing kindness, we're showing love. Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions. Have you ever said something like this, or ever been in the hearing of one of your fellow fools who said, well, I don't know about all of that, but here's what I think. Or I don't care about all of that, but I'd like to tell you what I think. And whatever I think trumps facts, it trumps opinion. I want you to hear how I've understood this. Don't bother me with the facts. The fool is not only unrealistic in his self-absorption, in his own opinions, but he is also undisciplined. He doesn't exercise proper discipline. Fools show their annoyance at once, but the prudent overlook an insult. If they're annoyed, they show it immediately. That's foolish. They have no discipline. They have no self-control of count to 10, sit on it, think about it before you open your mouth, before you retaliate. Discipline yourself. Fools show their annoyance at once. Fools give full vent to their rage, but the wise bring calm in the end. Well, it didn't take me long to tell him what I thought. I unloaded. Well, hold on. here's your sign. Could I get a volunteer to model this? Well, no, okay. I would risk it, but I think Corey's ready to zoom in, so we'll not do that. If you have no discipline, if you give full vent to your rage, you just put the sign around yourself that says, "Fool, the wise bring calm in the end. The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down." This is, all, again, a lack of discipline. What he's talking about is they don't save anything. They spend it all. They party. It's all gone. The wise save. They store up stuff. And they don't max out their credit cards. You say, hey, now you're getting a little too close to home. We all act foolishly at times, but he says if you want to be wise, store up something. Have a savings account. I like what John Wesley said. He believed in giving 10% and saving 10% and giving the rest away in some other way. Fools don't believe in storing up or saving because they're undisciplined. They're also undependable. Have you ever asked a fool to do something for you? Have you, as a fool, ever been asked to do something that you were not dependable to do? We'll talk more about that in just a minute. And finally here, and the characteristics of the fools, and there's many more, but they're unteachable. They're not really interested in learning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. And this is especially the hardened fools. Those who are simple can still be appealed to. In fact, there's one passage in Proverbs I kind of love. It says, you strike a scoffer and the simple one will wise up. It's like the mother who said, now, my child is very sensitive in kindergarten, and just give him an object lesson and he'll pick it up. So if he's misbehaving, hit the kid next to him and he'll straighten up. That's, he says, is the way the simple is. Sometimes if he sees someone over here getting disciplined, that'll cause him to wise up. But the hardened fool despises wisdom and doesn't want to change, doesn't want to listen. A rebuke impresses a discerning person more than 100 lashes into a fool. Solomon also said elsewhere that the rod is made for the back of a fool. It's like they go together. But you can't beat sense into him. If he's this hardened fool, this scoffer, then you think, I'll just beat some sense into him. Says it's not going to happen. A rebuke will impress someone who is discerning and wise and disciplined, but not a fool. Well, how do we deal with some of the fools in our life? Number one, we would suggest, according to what Solomon says here, is don't reward foolish behavior. Chapter 26, if you want to read one chapter that talks a lot about the fool, read chapter 26 of Proverbs. Over and over again, the fool is mentioned. And this passage is quoted by Simon Peter in the New Testament. As a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their folly. You say, well, that's not a very attractive picture of a dog going back to its vomit. And anytime I see our dogs going back to something they just lost, or that some other dog just lost, I can't handle that. Not on my watch. If you do it while I'm not watching, that's your business, but you're not going to gulp that down. Whether it came up here or down there, you're not going to go there. But he says a fool does that. A fool goes back to that stinky stuff that made you nauseous in the first place. Like tying a stone in a sling is the giving of honor to a fool. Would you give honor to a fool? Well, Solomon says don't do it. Now, if you have a little fool in your family who throws a temper tantrum, you don't reward them. And you know, sometimes it's a battle of the wills. The little 2-footer going against the 6-footer says, I want it this way and I want it now. And they don't do it when you're at home, they do it when you're out in the public. You're at Walmart and you can tell the difference in the cries. That's a cry of pain, that's a cry of hunger, that's a cry of I want it my way. Okay? And you're embarrassed with all that yelling and crying and so forth, and so you reward them. Solomon says, don't do that. If you reward or honor a fool for being irresponsible, it'll only ensure that more of that happens. If you tie a stone in a sling, that's the same difference. You're going to get whacked by it if you give honor to a fool. And be careful about giving a fool responsibility. In 26, again, the wise man said, sending a message by the hands of a fool is like cutting off one's feet or drinking poison. Okay, I've got this important message. I want you to take it to this important person, and I want you to do it no later than 2 o'clock this afternoon. Can you do it? Oh, yeah, sure. I'll get to it. You know, and just the way they agreed to it kind of makes you a little suspicious, but you have a responsibility here of not putting something responsible into the hands of someone who's irresponsible. It's one thing for that person to be a fool. You don't have to become one yourself by not recognizing that you just handed off to a fool who will not follow through. You've just cut off your feet, or you've just drunk the poison and assumed that someone else will get sick and die because you drank the poison. It's not going to happen. So be careful about rewarding foolish behavior. We have that old saying that friends don't let friends what? Drive drunk. That would be irresponsible. You might have an individual who, when he is sober, is a good person and responsible and perfectly capable, but if he's in a foolish position at that time, you don't give him a reward or responsibility that would do something in a damaging way. Solomon said elsewhere, it is better to meet a mother bear robbed of her cubs than encounter a fool in his foolish project. Would you like to meet a mother bear who's looking for her cubs? That's not on my thing to do. I was up in Yosemite one time at the top there, Nevada Fall, and watching the river and the fall crash over the side there, going down to Vernal Fall and on down to the valley. And I saw these 2 cute little cubs coming down on the other side of the river toward the water. And my first thought was, where's Mama? The closer they get to the water, the closer they get to me. And I'm looking for the big bear. I don't want to be anywhere close to her cubs, and they may trip over in my direction. He says, well, you're better off, you're probably safer meeting a mother bear who's looking for her cubs than you are dealing with a fool who's got this project going that's a foolish project. Be careful you don't get wiped out when you meet this fool with a foolish project. If you give him responsibility, you'll probably wind up cleaning up after. You'll probably wind up redoing something of what the fool left undone or did it the wrong way. So Solomon says, don't be the CEO for a fool. Don't give him responsibility, and be careful. Like an archer who wounds at random is one who hires a fool or any passerby. So if you want someone to help you and you're going to hire them, or you're going to have them do something on a friendly basis, be careful. if you don't want to suffer consequences yourself. Number 3 here, when dealing with a fool, be careful that you don't become one. Okay? In 26, a couple of my favorite verses back to back, verses 4 and 5. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him. Answer a fool according to his folly, or he'll be wise in his own eyes. Now you tell me, should I answer a fool according to his folly, or should I not answer a fool according to his folly? And the answer is yes. And you have to be above the grade level of a fool to figure that one out. Sometimes you answer a fool according to his folly. Other times you do not answer him according to his folly. And it depends on what the reason is. If you look at the top of your bulletin on the inside, foolish talk. A pastor named P.S. Henson was to speak at Lake Chautauqua on the subject of fools. His talk was likely based on 1 Corinthians 4, where Paul said, "We are fools for the sake of Christ." Bishop John Vincent introduced Henson with the following words: "Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to have a talk on fools by one of the most distinguished," long silence with laughter from the audience, "men of Chicago." When Henson went to the lectern, he said, amid giggles, "I'm not so great a fool as Bishop Vincent." Pause, silence, more laughter. "Would have you think." What did he just do? He answered a fool according to his folly, so that he wouldn't be wise in his own eyes. Okay? It depends on the situation. If someone is just kind of smarting off, give them that same kind of response to burst their bubble, Solomon said. On the other hand, don't answer a fool according to his folly, or you'll be just like him. George Bernard Shaw said, "Never wrestle with pigs. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it." That would be answering a fool according to his folly. Jesus said, "Don't throw your pearls where? Before the pigs. Don't give the dogs what is holy." You don't answer a fool in kind. We have the sign out on the east side of our church sign this morning. Mark Twain said, "Never argue with a fool. Onlookers may not be able to tell the difference." In other words, if you answer a fool according to his folly in the way that he has spoken, you may be confused with the fool himself. Who's actually the fool here? Okay? Well, our final one here, whoever the fool is, whether it's someone you're dealing with, or if you look around and maybe check the mirror and you see that, whoa, this time I'm the fool. Whoever the fool is, silence may help. And this is a great one to remember. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent. So when someone says, "What is your opinion of that?" If I feel obligated to say something, I may lean more toward the foolish camp. But if I recognize that there is wisdom in sometimes being silent, the discerning if they hold their tongues. So rather than open my mouth and remove all doubt that I am a fool, I can remain silent and be thought-wise. That was a wise no response. He didn't take the bait, or he didn't speak foolishly where he had no knowledge. So sometimes it will be assumed that we are wise when we go for the silence. Silence may help. Do not speak to fools, for they will scorn your prudent words. If you think that you're going to change a fool's mind, you may need to think again. You say, well, I'm not sure how to apply all of this. Can I say one word? Facebook. Have you ever spoken to fools on Facebook? Have you ever been a fool on Facebook? Your silence is wise. Okay? But when someone posts an article and then you go read the comment section, and people, instead of dealing with the arguments and dealing with reason, begin to just use names and name calling and so forth, and words that we cannot use here in the pulpit are used. There are a lot of fools out there. They might not be as foolish if they were talking eye to eye, but on Facebook, under the cover of anonymity, sometimes people lash out and say foolish, hurtful, silly things. We don't want to be among them. Do not speak to fools. You can't address every issue. They will scorn your prudent words. You think, well, a little reason, a little logical analysis will help them to see the light. Not if you're dealing with fools. Not if they despise wisdom. Not if they don't want to change. Not if they don't want to hear someone else's view or another point. If they want to just hear themselves and the echo of their own opinion, you're not going to get anywhere. Let's make sure that whether we're on Facebook or face-to-face, we don't act foolishly. At the end of chapter 9, first 9 chapters of Proverbs are sort of the introduction, these fatherly talks to this son. You have 2 women that are presented. You have Lady Wisdom. She's built her house. She's beautiful. She stands at the heights, at the crossroads of life, and she calls out and she makes an appeal to the simple and says, turn in here and learn wisdom. She's built her house with 7 pillars, and she makes her appeal to the fool, to you and me. But also at the end of chapter 9, there's another lady there who's kind of a shady lady. She's Lady Fool, and she makes her appeal too. And she says, at the crossroads of life, come into my house. Stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret, that's good. We have to listen to the siren song of Lady Fool or the sweet song of Lady Wisdom. And Lady Wisdom, as described in Proverbs chapter 8, sounds a whole lot like Jesus, Sophia, who was there at the creation. And I was the instrument of God's creation. If you want wisdom, come to me. And if you want to be wise, we come to Christ. We come to the source of wisdom, who is our wisdom, and we learn from him. It may seem foolish to the world, but the foolishness of God is wiser than the wisdom of humankind. We close with Ephesians 5, verse 15, where Paul said, do walk circumspectly, not as fools, making the most of your time. God gives us only so much time. Will we walk wisely? Will we take a wise path, or will we take a foolish path? Both paths have ultimate destinations. If we listen to what our Lord says, and he becomes our wisdom, and we listen to the wise sayings of the wise man in the Old Testament, as well as the one who's wiser than Solomon, we will live wisely. We will not make foolish choices that we could live all of our life with. Unfortunately, there are a lot of young people making foolish decisions, and sometimes those foolish decisions follow them the rest of their life. Let's be wise and determined to be wise now when we listen to the Lord's call. If you need to respond, will you do that while we stand and sing?